Only in Kentucky could a county with fewer than 10,000 people supply enough raw material to power the American steel industry for decades. Hi, I'm Michael. I'm learning a little bit more about Kentucky, one county at a time, all 120 of them. And today I'm learning about Crittenden County. Crittenden County was created in 1842, carved out of Livingston County, just as Western Kentucky continued dividing itself into smaller jurisdictions. Lawmakers named it after John J. Crittenden, one of Kentucky's most influential political figures of the 19th century. He served as U.S. Senator, Attorney General, and eventually governor, and spent much of his career just trying to keep the country from tearing itself apart as sectional tensions grew. The county seat is Marion, named for Francis Marion, the Revolutionary War general known as the Swamp Fox. Marion has always been small. Today it has a population a little over 3,000, and the entire county itself sits just under about 9,000 people. I bring that scale up because almost everything that happens in Crittenden County seems a lot bigger when you realize just how few people were actually involved. The Chickasaw Road crossed through what would become Crittenden County. Native peoples used it to reach Salt Licks in Illinois. Buffalo followed it. Settlers followed both. And those paths became wagon roads and then those county roads. So basically, if you drive any back roads today, you're most likely still following the routes that were laid down centuries ago. One of the most important early crossings was Flynn's Ferry, operating by 1803 on the Ohio River near what's now Weston. Before bridges, before railroads, before counties even existed on paper, ferries like this were complete lifelines for communities. They moved families west. They carried livestock, tools, furniture, entire households all across the river. And people just didn't pass through. They ended up stopping, they ended up working, and some of them ended up settling. The Ohio River, Cumberland River, and Tradewater River still define much of the county's boundaries, and early communities clustered along them. I'm going to get this wrong, but Dykesburg on the Cumberland grew into a river town. Tolu on the Ohio River became a shipping point for boats that wanted to go north and south. Flatboats and steamboats stopped regularly, tying Crittenden County into trade networks that stretched far beyond just western Kentucky. In the early 1800s, miners discovered lead ore in the hills northwest of Marion. The Columbia Mine opened in the 1830s. Mixed in with the ore was pale mineral miners initially tossed aside as waste, fluorite, or better known as fluorspar. By the 1870s, that waste mineral became the county's defining resource. It's because fluorspar turned out to be an essential for modern industry. It lowered melting points in steelmaking, it improved metal purity, and it became critical for aluminum production and chemical manufacturing. So once those uses for fluorspar became clear, demand exploded. Crittenden County sat at the center of the Illinois-Kentucky Fluorspar District, which for much of the 20th century supplied most of the minerals used in the United States, or rather most of the fluorspar used in the United States. That meant rail cars leaving Marion carried material that ended up in steel mills, factories, and industrial plants across the country. And for a rural county with fewer than 10,000 people, that's a pretty enormous role. And because of that mineral wealth, Crittenden County industrialized earlier than many rural Kentucky counties. Mines opened across the countryside, processing plants followed, workers arrived, housing went up near shafts and mills, and so for decades, Marion functioned as a mining hub far larger than its population even suggested it could be. In 1847, the Crittenden Furnace was built near, again, Dykesburg. It was followed by Jackson Furnace, and these operations used local iron ore, limestone, and charcoal produced from nearby forests. And historical markers confirm that Andrew Jackson helped direct early iron masters to ore deposits there. He didn't operate the furnaces himself, of course, but his involvement tied a future president to the county's industrial beginnings. And those furnaces consumed timber at an unsustainable pace, though. By the 1800s, the charcoal iron industry collapsed completely, leaving behind slag piles, furnace ruins, and stories that still surface when locals walk the creeks. The Civil War reached Crittenden County, but without major battles, but also not without damage. The county leaned Confederate in sentiment, though Kentucky officially remained in the Union. Troops moved through, supplies were taken, and like everywhere else, loyalties were split. In December 1864, Confederate General Hyan Lyon led a cavalry raid through western Kentucky. His men entered Marion and burned the Crittenden County Courthouse, along with several others across the region. Locals were allowed to remove some records, but many of the early documents were lost forever. In 1887, the railroad finally reached Marion, and so by 1912, the depot had expanded, allowing force bar to move by both rail and river. And so that combination was rare in Kentucky and helped push Crittenden County minerals into national and international markets. And the early 1900s brought conflict of a different kind. Crittenden County sat inside the Black Patch Tobacco region, where farmers organized against tobacco companies they believed were fixing prices. The vigilante group known as Night Riders, who I've talked about before, they enforced these kind of boycotts through intimidation and arson. And then came the Ohio River flood of 1937. River communities and surrounding farmlands were completely submerged. Homes were lost, roads washed out. Some places did get to rebuild, but others faded away entirely. The county also produced some political figures. Ollie James, born in Marion, became a U.S. congressman and later a U.S. senator. William DeBow, a Marion physician, also served as a U.S. senator from Kentucky. And F. Julius Fose, who grew up in Marion and once managed local force bar mines, became a world-renowned petroleum geologist and later funded Fose Hall, which still is in downtown Marion today. After World War II, the counties kind of changed again. Cheap foreign force bar flooded the market, and so mines were closed. By 1985, the last major force bar mine in Kentucky shut down. The railroad followed, and Marion's depot was demolished and the county had to pivot. Crittenden County remains home to one of the last operating ferry crossings on the Ohio River, still serving Kentucky, connecting the county to Illinois, much the same way Flynn's Ferry once did more than 2 centuries ago. So, that's Crittenden County. What'd I get wrong this time?